our next month's meeting will be back at the Forest Service. Write your senator today. Encourage them to end the shutdown. Hi.
Maybe read it right now.
Yeah.
That's unnecessary.
I've been writing, and it's like, hey, I'm not working, I got plenty of time to bug you, so here I am.
So anyways, just a quick update, some things are still open, so the National Petroleum Reserve was taking comments through today, so our chapter did submit comments that urged them to stick with the 2012 plan, which took a lot of time and energy and really identified the important wildlife areas. And as Milo can attest to, Tushbrook Lake is incredibly important for millions of birds.
Yeah, and that 2012 plan relied heavily, took, it was like 90% of the lands recommended as protected by Audubon Alaska, the group that we fall under and that I was served on the board for several years. And it was science-based. They used the science of Audubon Alaska, compiling data from all kinds of wildlife species to protect certain areas, and it's well-founded, the plan that they've been working with.
Yeah, I got the advertisement for the Chamber of Commerce for Alaska, and I was like, we need the oil, we gotta open this up. And so hopefully comments will help. But anyways, so do you want to ask about birds that people see?
Yeah. What have people been seeing? Bird-wise, anybody been out looking? Drew's not here right now, but
He posted a lot of good birds last night.
yeah, he just looked at the weir and the Eyak River right below the weir, and the redhead. One of the redheads is around. The canvasback's around. He found a hooded merganser at the boat ramp, a female, and what else?
Shrikes at the boat.
Shrikes. I heard about your guys' hawk owl sighting, and I've been out looking for hawk owls to photograph, and I think I saw one of your birds out Alleganic, and the one at 9 Mile has been quite regular, if you spend any time looking.
Is it on the north side of the road?
Both sides. And really start looking right at the 9 Mile marker, and
Hi.
yeah, he's quite regular.
Are those open?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can get more chairs. Sorry.
Anybody else?
Did you say shrikes?
Northern shrikes?
Where?
On the Delta?
Okay.
Yeah, they can be in town, but it's less common.
Okay.
Look on the tops of alders and trees, and they're kind of uncommon, but there's usually a couple of them around.
So we were just doing the who's seen what birds. Have you guys seen anything out there? Any interesting birds?
Northern
I saw a
hawk
dipper.
owls at
Alleganic?
Alleganic and 7 Mile, and lots of dippers.
The dippers at
And-
what, Power Creek or?
No, in Eccles
Oh, in
Creek.
Eccles Creek.
And there's one female bubblehead that's behaving really weirdly. That's all I can say.
Constantly displaying or what?
Yeah, well, it's going way up into the creek all by herself and swimming under the water and then popping up and then flying down and kind of repeating the same behavior again and again.
She might be eating salmon eggs.
Maybe she is. She might.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
I've got a few buffaloes that are going way up nice with the two females. And I saw it out in my entryway.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
cool.
6
That's cool.
Wow.
for half an hour.
Have you been seeing shorebirds out there at all?
When I came in Tuesday, a week ago, a rock sandpiper flew in front of the boat, and there were 11 rocks out here yesterday in Moya.
Oh.
But that's all I've seen shorebird wise.
And Kate, has the hummingbird still around?
I have not gotten any reports of any annas around. There's heated feeders at Diane's got one at heated feeder, and then somebody else has got another heated feeder here in town.
Nice
So,
place.
yeah, but nobody's told me that they've seen any recently in the last week, but I don't doubt that they're around. It's so mild.
Yeah, but it wasn't 2 weeks ago, so.
Actually, it's the the weather when it's right at freezing and you've got the wind and the rain and the snow, that's a heck of a lot more dangerous for these birds than if we're at a nice, good 30 degrees and it's frosty and calm. They can deal with that a lot better than they can this marginal, you know, wind.
Transitional.
Yeah, transitional weather.
Anybody else have any sightings? Okay, well, tonight's speaker is Tania Harrison, and I really appreciate her being willing to talk about her trip to Nepal in 2016. So, Tania, why don't you introduce yourself? Because would you like to introduce yourself?
I'd like to introduce Tania Harrison.
So you're a crew member?
Yeah, I fish for it.
Cool.
I have so for
She has crewed
quite a
on
few
my boat
years.
from time to time. Just a decade or so.
I've known her since she was a tot.
Oh, really? Oh.
From the Salem years. All right, well, welcome everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this trip I did in 2016. Obviously, it was a pretty squiddly fishing year, so I got to leave early in August and go to Nepal. I did not prepare. I did not even know I was going to Nepal till about maybe 2 weeks before I flew out. So I didn't have much to prepare. It was a rather spur-of-the-moment trip. And because I didn't make any plans before I got there, everything I made up as I went along. So this is the view of the Annapurna range from Pokhara. So this is the Fewatal, big lake in Pokhara. And the Annapurna trek takes you, basically you walk all the way around that range of mountains. Okay, so a bit about the Annapurna circuit. So it's actually the largest conservation area in Nepal, relatively recent, 1986. I believe it was actually fully established in 1992. They started working on it in 1986. It's changed pretty dramatically since then, as Michelle can tell us, because she was there in the early years. Right now there are tea houses, or basically places to stay, pretty well in every single little town, so you don't have to plan anything in advance. You just start walking and see how far you get, and when you get tired, there'll be a village and there'll be a place to stay, so you don't have to carry anything with you. It's incredibly diverse with bird species, 887 bird species, and well over half of them can be found in the Annapurna region. I was not a birder before going to Nepal. I didn't even own a bird book, but that was the first thing I bought when I got to Kathmandu, and I just started looking at birds because there's so many of them there. It seemed reasonable. And when you travel, you don't have the ability to carry lots of volumes for all different kinds of things, so it was easier to pick one thing to focus my trek on. I think probably one of the most striking parts of the trek was moving through the different biomes from the beginning of the trek, in the rice paddies, in the warm, in the wet, and working slowly up into the forests, and then up into the mountains and the high deserts, and then back down again. It's a beautiful transition, especially when you're walking and every day is just gradually getting different. Quite a bit of elevation gain from the start of the trek, 4,655 meters, and lots of things to see. The Kali Gandaki Gorge, they say it's the world's deepest gorge. I suppose they're measuring from the top of the mountains along the side of the gorge, which are Annapurna 1, which is 7,000 meters, and Delgiri, which is just over 8,000 meters on the other side. The Throngla Pass, some say it's the highest pass in the world, at 5,400 meters. And again, lots of other highest. Talicho Lake, which I think is just under 5,000 meters as well. And the rhododendron forest, which was remarkable. I did not even know that rhododendron forests existed. I was quite surprised when I stumbled across all this huge stands of rhododendron. I guess I'd only ever seen the garden variety, which you see shrubs, but they're huge forests of rhododendron. Big twisted trunks. This is a rather poor map. I brought mine, but obviously couldn't get it up on the screen, so if anyone wants to come take a look at it afterwards, there's a better map here. But basically you start down there in that lower corner, Bessie Sahar, and I hiked up and basically followed that red line with, detours on either side, and come all the way back down to Pokhara. And depending on, you can actually take a car, lots of people you can drive all the way to Chame and then just do short sections of the trip. I walked it all and it was about 250 miles with all of my side treks.
How long did it take you?
About a month. Yeah. I would have definitely taken longer and stayed up in the higher elevations longer had I not had a return ticket. Never go traveling with return tickets. It's a bad idea. And then you can see the cluster of mountains there, the Annapurna 1, 2, and 3, and Amatuer, which is that really pointy one in the first picture. And pretty much from Pisang onwards, you can get really good views of those mountains. Below in the southeastern corner, you're kind of in the rice. You're kind of further, much lower elevations, and it's very wet and not much in the way of mountain views, but it's very pretty anyways. Okay, so this is the bird book I bought. I just arrived in Kathmandu, and this was the first one I found, so that's what I used to identify everything that I saw there. I did not have a good pair of binoculars, which is unfortunate. Like I say, I didn't prepare very well for this trip, as it was so spur of the moment, so I could have seen probably more, but this is what it looks like when you start at Bessie Sahar, which is low elevation, lots of rice. The Nepali grow rice on these paddies, and then on the edges of the paddies they grow lentils and potatoes, which holds the paddies, the edges of the paddies. So basically they can grow their entire meal from one plot of land. Their dal, which is the lentils, and the rice. That's what the trail looks like. It's just a path through the woods. You might meet some donkeys or other people, but it's pretty narrow little track. The mountains. So this is still low elevation. As you go up into the mountains, it gets more forested. But and this river you follow this river all the way along the trek. Some of the first birds I saw. This adorable little wren, which was easy for me to identify. Sometimes it's called a cupwing. I wasn't able to find a whole lot of information about this little bird, other than what it feeds on and where it tends to be seen, but there wasn't much information about it, but it was awfully cute. It has a very beautiful little tittering call, which is much like our wren's lovely, lovely calls. So from the walking trail tends to be on one side of the river, and it's a little hard to see, but this line here, this is actually a road, and it's hard to see, but there is that little white spot is a truck. So the road that runs all the way up to Menang, right before the pass, goes on the other side of the river. So you're not actually walking with the traffic, but that's what they've done. And it's rainforest wet. So here I left the Annapurna trail itself and took a detour up into the higher elevations, so you can start to climb further up into the mountains, and the typical Nepali structures, the stone houses with tin roofs weighted down with rocks. Some of them still have the original slate roofs, but after the earthquake, I believe that was 2014 was the earthquake, they really tried to push a lot more using tin roofs because it's a lot safer. So pretty well every stream in Nepal is just covered in redstarts, and they are the most delightful little birds. I only identified these 5. I probably saw the others, but wasn't able to identify them because I wasn't very good at identifying birds yet. But it was very common on any given stream to see at least 3 of these, 3 species at any given time. They were everywhere. Delightful little birds that just feed in the stream, so they're swooping from rocks to streams and all around. They are insectivores. Again, so this is coming up to Bimtangs. This is the first time getting up to high elevation, 3,590 meters. This is a tiny little village. Pretty much its only purpose is as a junction for trade routes with their pack mules, and mostly now just tourism. So truckers passing through have a place to stop. Again, these are all rocks by a lovely river where I saw lots of those red starts. And this town is, a village I guess I should say, is right on the edge. That steep slope on the left-hand side, that's the lateral moraine of a glacier. So basically if you climb to the top of that and look down, there's a glacier on the other side of that. Pontchartrain Glacier. So here's the view. So there's Pontchartrain. Again, on the other side of these ridges, there are glaciers and some of the mountains behind them. This is sort of looking to the northeast corner of the Annapurna Conservation Area. And this was my first encounter with the common hoopoe, which are delightful little birds that flit around in the open meadows. And spend lots of time on the ground catching spiders and other insects. I did not know this at the time, but after being quite charmed by them, I learned interesting things, that they have these very strong smelling scent glands. When they lay their eggs, the females and the chicks develop this really strong scent. It smells like rotting meat. And by rubbing that through their feathers, they deter whatever potential predators or parasites may decide to come and attack them. And apparently the chicks from 6 days old are able to spray their feces directionally at whatever approaching predator may arrive. So they're feisty little birds. The chicks also hiss like a snake. So I'm rather wishing that I'd found some chicks at this point, but I did not know this at the time. I was just charmed by their headdresses and behavior, and they are absolutely everywhere. I think I saw probably more of these than anything else.
There's one record from Western Alaska.
Really?
Yeah, Jack Paniak shot it, I think, in 1976.
Wow.
September.
Do they think that had
Had come over from
just come
Asia.
over? Okay,
Yeah.
so it wasn't a population that had established. It was probably
Just
just
one
a,
record, and there's
just a
been one
random.
since then.
wow. Yeah, I mean, these birds are common all over Eurasia.
Mhm.
They were common in Europe. There's a species, a subspecies of this in Africa. They're common in the Middle East.
They're common in East Africa.
Yeah, I think this is the national bird of Israel, actually. Taylor, maybe you know? You were just there? Possibly, unconfirmed, possible national bird of Israel. Anyways,
Their Latin name is great. It's Upapa Epops.
ooh, papa, you pops.
Yeah.
I love that. So now, leaving Bintang, or coming further down and then starting to climb up into the higher elevations here. So you can see that we've moved away from the rice paddies and now it's mostly forested. Again, large gorges, lots of rocks. This is called the Pangundanda. It used to be a lake bed. So it's this huge flat expanse of rock. And during the uplifting of the Himalayas, it was shoved upright. And it's quite startling when you come across it and you don't know that it's going to be there. I didn't have a guidebook. I didn't have anything. I had no idea what to expect from day to day. So So I stumbled across this huge rock and again, found out later what it was.
Were you doing this on your own?
Yeah.
I mean, solo?
Yeah, I mean, I met people along the way and made friends and hiked with them, but I mean, I went to Nepal by myself to just see what it was like. It was very spur of the moment. Yeah, so this is another picture of this huge flat rock. Yeah, it's completely bizarre. It almost looks like, you know, if you've been to meteor craters and things like that, it has that smooth quality to it, but it's just this. It's slate, and it's the bottom of the lake bed. Continuing to go up, that's buckwheat. I had no idea that buckwheat had pink flowers. There are lots of buckwheat and corn being grown at these higher elevations. The buildings are quite interesting. They're all stone. They use the horns, the yak horns and the goat horns, to hold the wooden beams in place to build the second stories. And lots of the slate cobblestone in the streets.
Could you point out more definitely where the yak horn is?
It's this.
Oh, okay.
See? So basically if you imagine the shape of the horn, the flat part is underneath this is wood. This is a wooden beam running this way. And so this is just holding that in place.
I think in a lot of cases, the entire skull of the animal is buried inside that wall.
Possibly.
That's
I
what
don't
I
know.
thought was going on. Yeah, I was there just after Tania, and I saw the same thing.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, if you just start looking at any of these buildings, if you look close enough, you'll see them. And not always consistently either. I mean, here's some. Yeah, I'm not sure. These smaller structures, I think these were just shelters for some of the yak herders. I think these were pretty rough looking structures. But this is an actual town. And wagtails, once you get up. These are, again, they're everywhere, but they're incredibly charismatic little birds, mostly because they cannot move without waggling their butt, hence their name. I wasn't able to find anything definitive on why they do this. There's certain kinds of sandpipers, I think, that also have that butt waggle behavior.
Yeah.
Smothered sandpipers.
And pipits, which they're related to wagtails.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know of any reason why?
Maybe just startle insects or flush insects
Yeah.
is one thought that I've heard
Yeah.
before. Yeah.
A lot of the birds like dippers and spotted sandpipers that bob are like water birds, and so that's like a camouflage thing, but these guys are not water birds. So.
No, I mean, these
Yeah.
were all up in the higher elevations where it was, pretty dry and grassy. Yeah. The males come along and start building the nest, and when the female gets interested, she'll go ahead and finish, and he might come back once the chicks have hatched, but he doesn't help with incubation or anything like that. So.
We had one of these nesting on the $1 Million Bridge 15 years ago or so.
Are they come here?
They show up in western Alaska with
Okay.
some regularity or regularly,
Mhm.
but it's a very odd sighting for Cordova. And there were eggs in the nest. Nobody ever saw a pair of birds, and then it failed. It didn't
Well,
hatch.
that would, so there would only be one bird sitting on the eggs until they hatch, then the males show up after that.
Yellow wagtails are much more common. You
Okay.
see them on all roads north.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, there are yellow wagtails in Nepal as well, although I didn't either see them or identify them correctly. But these, most of what I was able to identify were the things that were everywhere, because I was new at this. But pretty cute little birds. And this is the sort of area where I was seeing them in. So this kind of high, scrubby, colder climates. This is one of the villages, and there again you can see the pink buckwheat and the cornfields. I didn't actually ever see anybody eating corn. I think that must have been mostly for animal feed, and they distill liquor from the corn, make Roxy. lots of Buddhist stupas all over, and the prayer wheels and things like that all over Nepal. Right, just in the middle of nowhere, you stumble across these things all the time. Many of them are quite old, like 600 and 700 years old. Like the one in Braga. So this is a city nestled in by the river. This whole upper structure is a monastery, and the rest of the town is below it. And this one is, again, no one could really definitively tell me exactly how old it is, but somewhere in the range is about 600 years old. And then up here, so there's a hanging glacier below Annapurna 1, and there's a monastery up there, a tiny little monastery, and a cave where supposedly Milarepa, who was a yogi in the 11th century, spent many years living and meditating and doing his thing. And there was a monk who was living up there, who I had a conversation with in very broken English and lots of hand signals. And he'd been up there for 3 years and hadn't come down, so hanging out up there. Quite cold and miserable, I would think.
So would people deliver food to him?
Yeah, bring up food. And it was a tiny, tiny little stone structure with a little fire in the middle of the room, no chimney, and it had a few pieces of wood and bits of plastic. People in Nepal don't have any concept of plastic. You know, we bring all this plastic stuff to developing countries, but never talk about how to treat it, and there's plastic fires everywhere. People cook their food on burning plastic. Yeah, the rivers are all completely choked with plastic. Especially in the cities, and Kathmandu it's quite appalling. Yeah, these pictures all look lovely, but even that's when you get lost, this frequently happens on narrow, winding trails, and you get lost, you're not really sure if you're in the right place, you're like, oh, there's trash. That must mean I'm on the right trail, because people are littering, And like any developing country, everything's single-use packets, so at a hot spring there's going to be single-use packets of shampoo, single-use packets of chewing tobacco, and people just don't have the means to buy a whole bottle like we would that lasts all year. It's a treat. Oh, I get to buy shampoo, and it's going to be in a plastic container, which then goes in the river. Yeah, it's our fault, not theirs. But the rest of it's pretty. So here's Salicio Lake, supposedly the highest freshwater lake in the world. I didn't actually go swimming in this one. I went swimming in the other one, in Pokhara Lake. But yes, it's 4,920 meters. Lots of, just like here, lovely sounds of calving glaciers all around. And some charismatic little flowers. It was a bit cold. There was a little bit of fresh snow. This is probably early September now that I was here, maybe early to mid-September. I would imagine it's probably impassable in the winter. This is a little shelter that, again, wasn't even being used at the time. And the trail to Salicio Lake is a bit treacherous. It's just this little winding, narrow track across a landslide. On the way, on the way to, it was okay, but there's definitely times when you gotta wait because there's a big slide coming down. You wait till it passes and keep going. Yeah.
What are they carrying?
They are carrying plywood. 8 sheets each. The Nepali people are absolutely unbelievable. And they carry everything with a band around their head. So instead of carrying something on their shoulders like we would, they carry every day with a band that goes around their head, and it's windy too. I mean, this is a huge valley. This goes all the way down to the water, and they're walking on, you know, a path that wide on a slide path.
How thick were the sheets? Like they're 1/2 inch sheets?
No, these are maybe, I don't know,
3/8 or
quarter inch sheets, but still heavy. And just, I mean, even if it was one sheet, the windage that you get from carrying a piece of plywood like that on a strap on your forehead is mind-boggling. There's a lodge at the top here for tourists like myself to come and spend the night, so you can get up and go see the lake early in the morning. And the lodge is built by the Nepali. Everything is carried in just like that. They don't have, there's no road going up here, so the entire structure is built with like people
It's
carrying
like
things
4
like
guys
that.
in squirrel suits.
Yeah, I asked the proprietor at the hotel. I said, "Well, how many? Surely people have died. Like, I could imagine dying doing this." And he eluded my question. He said, "Oh, we don't lose any white people." That wasn't my question, you know. So he didn't want to tell me, I guess.
Those are
Hopefully
200,
not too many.
they're 200-pound loads if they're 1/4 inch sheets.
Yeah.
8 of them.
That, when we were there, the legal load for a quarter was 200 pounds. They were
Really?
expected to carry 200 pounds, and Paul and Karen and I were on the same trip, and there were 2 loads that really astounded me, and one was a group of people carrying rebar that was bent back and forth, and it looked like it was about 300 pounds, and they had a piece of burlap on their back, and that was it. And most of them were climbing with just the front half of the flip-flop. They'd worn the heel off, and they would carry these enormous weights that way
Yeah.
with a trunk line. And then I remember that if you gave them like a really high-tech backpack, they had these woven baskets. They'd throw it in the woven basket or hang it from a trunk line itself. They would never put it on their shoulders. They thought that was utterly ridiculous.
Well, I mean, it's culture. I mean, we think that this is normal and that this is ridiculous. It's logical that they would, you know.
East Africa use a handbag.
Yeah, a lot of places
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Enormous legs and calves.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never tried it. I suppose I should at some point. See how much weight I can carry on my neck.
I think it's
Anyways.
something you build up to.
Probably. Let's hope. So this is one of the largest cities. This is on the Annapurna, is Manang. So this is right before the high pass. The last big place before the high pass. Still not that much of a village. Although it probably looks a lot more developed than when you were there.
It looks a lot bigger, but
Yeah.
Manang was one of my favorite places on the entire trek, and the people were really friendly, and it was a nice mix of being up but still having lots of greenery and things to
Right.
eat.
After
Yes,
this, it
on the
gets,
mountainsides.
there's almost nothing. I mean, there's low scrub, but that's about it.
There's cultivated fields here on the right.
Yep. Yeah. Lots of fields.
Basically, everything is cultivated. When we were there, which was 1990, everything was cultivated up to elevation where finally nothing will grow, and then the yaks would be above that.
Yeah, I would say that that's pretty much how it was when I was there as well. Lots of deforestation, and the tourist industry has put a huge load on the forests because, you know, they demand hot food and whatnot, and all of that gets cooked on wood stoves. And they've been really pushing to try to get propane and different fuel sources up into these villages, but for a long time it was wood only, and I mean they would just cut down all the trees because they needed the wood for fuel.
How about yak dung?
They burn a lot of yak dung.
Mm-hmm.
It's all saved and collected and burned.
But when you have an environment like this, you only need to cut a few trees and it becomes a problem because there's not that much there to hold the soil. So it goes quickly. the pass, the high pass. I was pretty lucky to have a clear day for it, considering I wasn't at the right time of year. But it's like this, it's completely barren. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure about that side. But, yeah, high pass.
Completely barren except for the sedums.
Yep, there's some sedums and other, tiny little low plants, but other than that, it's just loose rock. And I imagine it must be probably quite windy too in certain times of the year. And then once you get over the pass, you descend down into this valley, and it stays pretty dry until you get down close to the river. They're working on building a road.
Oh my God.
See, which eventually will be able to get people all the way up to the pass, I'm sure. But again, the amount of erosion caused by putting a road in is going to be substantial.
Did you see people coming up from the other side with motorbikes? We saw somebody on a bike who had come up that road and then all the way up to the top.
Wow, no, I was there not during typical tourist season. That's more October. I was there a month early, so I didn't see very many people. There was a handful, enough that if you saw some other people, you'd probably go say hi, that sort of thing. In every hostel, it would mostly just be myself or whoever I was traveling with, and that was it. Yeah, and so then now you descend down this river valley into Muktina, which is a pilgrimage city for both Hindus and Buddhists. There's a huge temple there. Part of the reason I gathered that there's natural gas, so there's some eternal flame, and the waters have some legendary healing powers. But the Hindus have some ancient temples, and the Buddhists also come here to worship. So basically everywhere in this town there are pilgrims coming from India and Nepal and all over. It's just a constant flow of people coming into this village. And then you can see
Arriving on foot, arriving by.
some on foot, some on horseback, some by motorbike, however, or some with cars, however they can get there.
So there's a road to there.
There wasn't a road. Didn't the road only go to Johnson?
You can drive now.
There were no roads any places. She's showing roads in 1990.
Yeah, the road goes almost all the way up to the pass. It goes past Muktina. I mean, you can't actually cross the pass. And the road goes to Manang.
Yeah, the road did not.
So basically it's just from Manang to Muktina that you can't drive.
Yeah, there was.
So very soon, probably within the
roads
next 10
weren't
years,
there.
you'll be able to drive around the whole thing.
Yeah, there was no road in Manang at all.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to drive it. The roads are terrifying. But I suppose one could. Prayer flags strewn in absolutely every direction all over the place. Old ones and new ones. Yeah, Muktina was a lovely town, a good place to rest after the pass. Some of the buildings, so this sort of paint pattern of the reds and the whites and the yellows is a pre-Buddhist influence, so more of the Tibetan influence. And I only saw this sort of northwest of Muktina, so in the Kagbeni region. And this is one of the houses going down to Kagbeni. This is yak dung, which I guess they needed to patch up some holes, and it seemed convenient to use yak dung. Inside these houses, it was very beautiful because they're all made out of clay on the inside, so there are no hard corners anywhere. It's just a lovely space to be if you can tolerate the smoke. from the
Perhaps
wood
they're just
fire
drying
that
to
doesn't
death.
have any any chimney and probably has some plastic in it. Yeah, they're quite lovely. Lots of Himalayan griffins. These are big, beautiful vultures. Supposedly, a group of them can eat yak in something ridiculous like 160 minutes or something like that. But they are everywhere. You see them soaring around in the thermals, especially in these higher elevations. I wanted my very best to see a lammergeier. I could not positively identify one. I kept remembering Sibley's words that you only see what you want to see. So every time I thought I saw it, I was like, you don't actually definitively see it. You can't say that you saw it. But lammergeiers, they are plentiful in Nepal. I probably saw them and didn't manage to identify them. But they are remarkable because they teach their young to drop bones from high elevations. So they fly up with a bone, drop it, and allow it to shatter, and then they can eat the bone marrow inside there. And it takes them quite a long time to learn how to do this, to figure out for a given size bone and a given size surface how far they need to drop it and how they're supposed to do this. So it takes them a long time to learn that. But I didn't see any. Very sad. So this is the Kaligandaki Gorge. And this is the town of Kagbeni. So basically you come down from the high desert and the rest of the trail just follows along this river all the way back down to the lower elevations. And as you can see, everything that's possible to be cultivated has been cultivated. So on the left-hand side of the river, you have the Annapurnas. On the right-hand side is Dalgiri, which for a long time was considered the tallest mountain in the world until they discovered Everest. So it took them a long time to find Everest. It's now the 6th tallest mountain in the world at 8,167 meters. And Kagbeni is an absolutely lovely town. It's again has a lot of pre-Buddhist influence, so you'll see a lot of that red and white and orange striping on the buildings. Yeah, and a huge, huge monastery that they were building at the time. It used to be a trading post, but now it's just a place for tourists to pass through and people to live. There's this fertility center? Supposedly the protector of the city. He does seem rather fertile, but again, that's yeah, some pre-Buddhist influence there. And this was approaching Dashain, which is a festival. So there was lots and lots of goats being herded together and about to be brought down to slaughter. Dashain's a festival in Nepal where you are supposed to, as a family, take a goat and the whole family gets together and you kill the goat and eat it. So there were goats everywhere. Oh, and actually you can see this in Marfa too, but they store all their firewood in great big piles on the roof. It's supposed to dry it, but see all of it's pretty small stuff. And now just heading back down, you can see as we're getting down back into the lower elevations, it's much more treed, much more lush. It has a lot more forest. The town of Marfa is very charming, lots of whitewashed stone buildings. I don't particularly know why they all decided to paint their buildings white with red doors, but it's very lovely. And they grow lots of apples here, this apple orchard, so there's apple juice and apricot juice, they grow lots of that there. That's the main thing. So this is Sekung Lake. And looking towards Nilgiri, which is in that Annapurna range. This is again, just off the Annapurna on a side trip. While I was up here, I ran into a couple Nepali who told me that every year in April there's a festival here and they slaughter a water buffalo at this lake. So that's what I was thinking of. But there were no water buffalo being slaughtered there now. But they did find a snake. I'm not sure what kind, but they killed it. Before I don't know what it was, but there was a snake there. Yeah. And thrushes. This is actually the only photograph of a bird I was able to get. The thrush in the middle. It was dead. I only had my iPhone as a camera, so I wasn't able to take pictures of anything. But I think this is either a plain-backed thrush or a long-tailed thrush. Probably plain-backed, which is the top one. But again, I don't know. It's been dead for a while, so I wasn't exactly sure. But there are so many thrushes in Nepal, and lots of them are quite beautiful and bright. Lots of blue thrushes and thrushes with orange on them. But unfortunately, this was the only one that I was able to get close enough to. Again, heading down out of this valley, so it's, I guess this is why it is the steepest gorge in the world. It's beautiful little things. This is an agriculture method where they've grown corn and they harvested the ears of corn off and then grew the beans up the corn stalks. I think some Native Americans in the lower 48s also did this, right? The Three Sisters, right?
Yeah, it's common
Yeah.
in Mexico, South America, and Southwest.
Yeah,
United States.
I've read about it
Beans and
before, but
squash.
that's the first time I'd ever seen it being done.
Do they grow squash there too?
They grow some kinds of squash and they grow certain kinds of cucumber, a bitter melon, things like that. Bitter melon's very common. And then they dry the corn on their roofs. Most of the corn that I saw, again, was being used to feed animals and to make Roxy. They were distilling it, but I was never fed corn and I never saw people eating it, so it wasn't considered fit for human consumption. Pretty rock formations.
Is that you in the waterfall?
Mm-hmm. And now we're coming down into the rhododendron forest, which again surprised me because I didn't know that rhododendron could grow like that. These huge, beautiful, twisting branches. And again, I'm leaving the Annapurna and taking a little side trip back up into the higher elevations. So you're leaving the farmland below and getting up into the forest. This is supposedly the trail, although for a long time I wasn't quite sure. And most leeches I have ever seen in my whole life. They were just crawling on the trail, and if you stopped, they would swarm towards you and crawl at you. And I mean, it was amazing. Absolutely everywhere. I mean, you could not stop moving, or you would have leeches on you.
So no camping there.
No, I would not sleep on the ground here. I wouldn't stop to take a pee here. I mean, it was really bad. You could watch them just change direction and head for you. They must have sensed the warmth or whatever. But yeah, and I suppose I'd always associated leeches with palms, wet palms, but not here. This is a wet forest, but they were just crawling about on the ground. It was stunning. And pheasants. So actually this region has all 6 pheasant species. I only saw the Kalish pheasant. It's very common, but the other ones are quite lovely, like the Satyr Tragopan, which can inflate that bright display for mating. But the Kalish pheasant is interesting. It's native to Nepal, and it breeds, it's monogamous, but in 1962, they introduced a population to Hawaii on the Big Island. And that population has sometimes breeds cooperatively, where you'll have one female and 6 males helping to raise a clutch of eggs. So there's a really interesting cultural difference there, but the Nepali pheasants don't do that, but I thought that was interesting. Transplanted Kalish pheasants. I don't know why they brought them to Hawaii, apart from probably for game, probably to shoot. Copradana, so this is, again, I just whizzed back up into the higher elevations because it's nice up there. So the pointy mountain is the Machu Picchu, and then this is Annapurna 3. And lots of yaks. They're everywhere. They've had some trouble with yaks because it's getting so much warmer in Nepal. The yaks can't tolerate the heat as well. So they're breeding yaks with cows to try to make an animal that can withstand the same elevation but warmer temperatures. Yeah. So lovely. Again, just more pretty high mountains.
Or cats.
And now back down quite quickly into the lower elevations. There's one of the older slate roofs that I was talking about earlier. They're getting away from, but yeah, now it's back to bamboo forests and lots of wet. And there's just a little show of some of the lovely people of Nepal. Children are always great. Again, carrying everything. This is, a roll of aluminum roofing, carrying it up a slide path. The goat herding through the streets of a village. Exciting, and yeah, so obviously they needed 2 goats for their family. They're carrying 2 goats on a motorbike. Yeah. Just 2 goats. 2 goats and 2 people. And also, only the driver wears helmets. It's considered rude as a passenger to wear a helmet on a motorbike. Why? I don't know, but you'll never see a passenger wearing a helmet, even if it's a child.
Insist on driving.
Yeah, insist on driving. Don't drive motorbikes, more to the point. These kids look like they just got toothbrushes. I'm pretty happy. Goats filling up every space. So again, all of these goats are being herded for the Dashin festival. They're all going to be eaten. There's some links to the photographs. So again, all of the bird photographs I had to take from the internet because I didn't have any. So, any questions? Yeah.
Did they use mules or donkeys at all on the trails to transport stuff?
Absolutely. So actually, here, this picture ended up being a little small. Oops. So here they've got a mule train. See, the mules are carrying big white bags of something. You'll see mules carrying propane bottles and all kinds of stuff.
So did you have them passing you on the trail a lot?
Oh yeah. Mules, horses, water buffalo, cows, goats, yaks. Cows are the worst. Maybe horses are the worst.
But were the cows being herded, or they just happened to?
No, the cows, the cows and the yaks tended to not really have. Sometimes you'd see a person, but it wasn't like they were being herded. The goats, because they were being herded in these huge numbers, being funneled down the road, they would have people with them. And the mule trains. Yeah, lots of mule trains. Basically, wherever they could bring horses up to, they would.
And do people use Sherpas at all for this circuit or no?
People do. You don't need to. Yeah.
We did,
Yeah.
but we carried all the food and all the fuel for the entire trek.
Yeah, I had a
And
25
there were
liter.
no tea houses.
Yeah, if there was no tea houses, you would have to. But there's places to eat and sleep
Every night.
everywhere. So I had, 25-liter rucksack with a sweater and some clothes to sleep in. That was it.
So you didn't have to have a sleeping bag?
No sleeping bag.
So what were the conditions of the tea houses? They give you blankets and a
Yep,
pad?
they give you a blanket, yep. And there would be a bed. You check it for bed bugs, but I never found any. No, it was really quite civilized. The whole trip,
I mean, when you went to stay at one of these tea houses, what was the cost for the?
oh, a couple dollars and your dinner would be included. Yeah, everything's incredibly, I think I spent 6 weeks there and I think I spent $350.
Wow.
Were cranes migrating?
Not yet.
Oh.
If I had been there a little later, there is a migration path that goes right over the Kaligandaki Gorge, and I was not there. If I had come a little later, did you see any cranes?
No.
Okay. Huh. Because it should be like October onwards, you can start seeing the cranes, but I was there in September, August and September, so.
We saw them, I think, in September on the Tibetan Plateau heading south.
Okay.
Yeah, I was there in December.
Okay, so maybe you were there too late and I was there too early.
Yeah.
And they came in the middle. Yeah, no, there were definitely some things that I had wanted to, like there's hornbills down in Chiplon,
Oh.
but I didn't end up going down there because I spent so much time up in the higher elevations, so,